Calculus, Lesson 5A. Now I've split this one up into two lessons. We're going to be doing a couple more rules on top of the chain rule that we just did. And that's going to be the product and quotient rules. They are rules that we use in certain situations when there are certain functions and we can't use any of the other rules. So at the moment we're just developing this array of rules that we get to use under the different circumstances. So I'll introduce it and then I'll go into when we use each one. So to start off with, I just want to do the product rule in 5A. We'll touch on that, and in 5B we'll do the quotient rule. So on the back of the last lesson we had the introduction of product rule, in that we wanted to know when we've got these two, this was the actual question, and we have there clearly two terms that are not combinable, they are not expandable. You've got your x timesing by your 2x minus 3 to the 4. So they're two x terms that you can't actually expand into one and just differentiate it accordingly. So when this happens and you've got these two multiplying terms that are not expandable, that is when we use product rule. The way product rule works is we recognize that we've got these two separate terms. We've got our first one, which is our x, and we're going to call that u. And we group the other one together, at 2x minus 3 to the 4, and we call that our v. So our two terms that are multiplying together are our u and our v. Now, the derivative, and it works differently to stuff we've done. This is an entirely new way of doing it, but the derivative works off a formula. We will get the derivative of that equation by just doing v times by u dash, so the derivative of u, plus u times by v dash. So the derivative y dash is equal to vu dash plus uv dash. And that will give us the derivative. Now, as you know, unlike a chopping board, for any time we have a formula, especially if there's going to be some working to do and we want to sub it in. So we do all the work in beforehand in our chopping board. So let's write down our u, which we know up there is x. And therefore we differentiate that and we get our u dash. So we're preparing all our ingredients on our chopping board, ready to sub them in. So we do our u and our u dash. The derivative of x is 1. We then do our v, and we've got to do our v dash. Now how do we differentiate that? How do we differentiate 2x minus 3 to the power of 4? And hopefully you're saying out loud, chain rule, because it's a bracketed function to a big power there. So it is a chain rule. And so on the back of the last lesson we just had, bring down the power, minus 1 from the power, and times by the derivative of the bracket, which is 2. If that doesn't make sense, go back and review the chain rule lesson, but it should do. We then tidy that up, so we're left with 8 outside of 2x minus 3 all cubed. Now, by doing this, by doing our chopping board there, it makes life a hell of a lot easier when we go and sub it in, because we've got our exact ingredients all chopped up, measured out, ready to go. So when the recipe calls for it, you fling them into your pot. So let's sub them in, and I like to sub them all in separate brackets. So first things first, write out the formula. I mean, we obviously had it there, but that's an indication. I want you to write out the formula every time we do one of these questions. It'll help you remember it, and it'll also be easier to sub into. That's subbing it in, and you can see I sub each of them individually into their own brackets so that I don't ever get any timesing or negatives or anything confused. In the next step, we'll tidy that up. So we'll do all the multiplying that we can. So what we'll do is we've got 2x minus 3 to the 4 times 1, so that'll just become 2x minus 3 to the 4. And on the other side we've got x times by 8 times our 2x minus 3 to the 3. So that'll become 2x minus 3 to the 4 plus 8x times 2x minus 3 all cubed. And that is the derivative there. Now, this is actually probably the hardest part of product rule questions, and that is take out the highest common factor. Okay? As it happens, this is going to be the case with basically every single product rule question you do. So take note of it. It's probably the hardest part of it, because once you do your chopping board, the rest is easy. This is probably the hardest part, is taking out the highest common factor. With most of the questions you do, you're going to have a chain rule within it, as you can see by the VV dash, that's the chain rule. And so as a result, you're going to get that 2x minus 3. You're going to get that chain, that 2x minus 3 cubed, as your common factor. So you're often going to get that chain as a common factor. There'll sometimes be more common factors, but in this case, that is going to be it. So our common factor there is 2x minus 3 cubed. Hopefully that makes sense. Now, what do we times by 2x minus 3 cubed in order to get 2x minus 3 to the 4? Well, we times it by 2x minus 3. And how do we get to 8x outside of 2x minus 3 cubed? Well, you times it by 8x. So that's how we get what's in the brackets there. Now we tidy that part up. 2x plus 8x is 10x minus 3. And that there is a perfectly done product rule question. So in quick review, write out your formula. Do your chopping board. Get all your ingredients chopped up and ready to go. Sub them all in. Don't skip steps, expand it in the next step. Then take out the highest common factor. You'll need to do that in pretty much every product rule question you do. That highest common factor is going to be at very least the chain rule part of it. Take it out, make sure you are expanding it correctly, and tidy it up in the last step. Done and done. Now let's get on to an example that you can try yourself, so you can pause me, but I'm going to work through that. And you can see I've added the product rule to the right hand column there, just for now. So differentiate f of x equals x squared into 1 minus 4x all cubed. Now pretending that we didn't know this was immediately a product rule, you look at it and you see you've got two x values, so two terms with x in, that are not going to combine. They are not expandable because the x squared can't expand into that bracket because that bracket is to the power of 3. So they are not expandable. Okay? When we've got that, we know it's a product rule. Two multiplying terms not expandable. So we call x squared our u, and we call 1 minus 4x all cubed our v. So if our u is x squared, our u dash is 2x. And if v is 1 minus 4 to the x, 1 minus 4x to the 3, our v dash will be, it's a chain rule, so we work it out as such. Bring down the power, minus 1 from the power, and times by the derivative of what's in the brackets, which is minus 4. Tidy it up, leaves us with minus 12 into 1 minus 4x all squared. Okay, there's our chopping board done. Now, write out our formula. VU dash plus UV dash. VU dash plus UV dash. Sub them in as such. So it looks ugly, but now we'll just tidy it up. All the things we can multiply together, we will for the moment. That's all separated by that plus in the middle. So in the next step, we just rearrange it to look a bit neater. The minus 12 times is by the x squared. That's the only major change. So that becomes minus 12x squared, 1 minus 4x all squared as our second term there. And now you should remember the most important thing at this point, and probably the hardest thing at this point, is taking out that common factor. So it's not going to tell you to do that. You need to be able to instinctively see that. Take out the highest common factor. In this case, as I said, there's always going to be that chain rule that'll be part of the highest common factor. In this case, it's going to be 1 minus 4x all squared. But there's also another highest common factor that's in both those terms. And that is 2x as well. So there is our highest common factor. 2x outside of 1 minus 4x all squared. And now we've got to expand that through. So what do we need to times that by in order to get that first term? Well, just a 1 minus 4x. What do we need to times it by to get that second term? Well, we need to times it by minus 6x. Because the 2x to become minus 12x squared times is by minus 6x. Next step. Tidy it up. So next step, all you do is tidy it up and you're left with 2x into 1 minus 4x all squared into 1 minus 10x. That's a successful, perfectly worked product rule question, worth about 3 marks. Try another one. Differentiate y equals 6x minus 1 into 3 minus x to the 6. Now we look at that again and we think, can we expand that? Because if we can, we do. But in this case, we can't. There are two x terms that are multiplying together that are not expandable. They're not combinable because of that to the power of 6. Therefore, it's a product rule. And now that we know it's a product rule, we get our chopping board out. U is the first term, 6x minus 1. V is the second term, 3 minus x all to the 6. So U dash will be 6, V dash, well, it's a chain rule, so you bring down the power minus 1 from the power times by the derivative of the bracket. Hopefully that should just be pretty fluent by now. We'll tidy it up, make it minus 6 into 3 minus x to the 5. And we're ready to go. As usual, we write out our formula. We sub all the terms into our formula, all in their own individual brackets. And then in the next step, we tidy it up. So just rewritten, that's 6 into 3 minus x to the 6 minus 6 into 6x minus 1 into 3 minus x to the 5. I wouldn't go expanding too much now because it's easier to see your HCF when everything's unexpanded and it's in its own form. And that's obviously the next step, as it always is. Take out the HCF. So we should see the common one there, which is our chain. So the 3 minus x to the 5 is common in both. And in this one, we've also got another common factor, and that's the 6. So our HCF is 6 into 3 minus x to the 5. Now we've got to look and see what does that time need to times by in order to get that first term. Well, it needs to times by another 3 minus x. And what is it needed times by in order to get that second term? Well, that needs to times by a minus 1 and a 6x minus 1. So you write it out like that in its brackets, and again in the next step is when you expand it and tidy it up. You never want to try to do more than one step at one time. So in the next step, we just tidy up our brackets there. So it's 3 minus x, expand the minus 1, so it's minus 6x plus 1. And then further bit of simplification, and we're left with 6 into 3 minus x to the 5 outside of 4 minus 7x. And that's another product rule done. And that is product rule. It's that simple. It's going to be the same every time. Just follow that set formula. Have your formula, do your chopping board, sub it into your formula, be careful not to skip steps, expand it through one at a time, take out that HCF, and then tidy it up. That is product rule done in 10 minutes.